And then we're going to switch back to the shader. Alrighty. Okay, we have finally landed ourselves on the face. I'm going to just start with the ear and then switch needles. And we're about to get on down to the face. Now this is a semi-small face to even be working with right here for a portrait, so we're going to actually approach it really delicate. You just want to build up the face little by little, starting with your lights, to your darkers, to your blacks, and just little by little build it up. Okay, we'll start with the lips. Keeping in mind you're just following that same thing I said over and over again. The lips are the only thing that matters to me at the moment right now. I'm going to kind of approach the face the same way we approach the cognac glass. Just really subtle. Doing most of our shades with the actual outliner just to get it nailed. I mean, this face is kind of small and it's packed with lines, wrinkles, all kinds of detail, which make it for a good portrait, but also a stressful one if you don't follow the rules. Me in general, I like to do my face last because it's where I need the most concentration. And you know, there's other people that'll do it the other way. There's no wrong or right way to do what I'm about to say. It's just that for me, I like to worry about the most detailed spot last when everything else is done. So right now, as I'm doing the face, my worries aren't, oh, I got to do this whole entire thing. It's more like, this is it. It's the last stretch. And it kind of takes a little bit of pressure off of me. And my thing is if you're doing a portrait, you want the least amount of pressure possible. So basically, I'm taking the pressure off of me now. I'm just literally going to just concentrate on every nook and cranny. Now, earlier when I talked about looking back and forth at your reference, it doesn't get more detailed than the face. When you're doing a face, that's when you really have to use those rules. They have to really, really apply. And this is the 50% right here. Now when I do portraits, what I like to do, and like I said, my way isn't the only way. There's a bunch of ways to do it, but my way is what I like to do. And what that way is I like to complete the mouth, the nose structure, the eyes, and then I like to do all those things with my liner. And then I like to move on to the shader and then do the bigger areas of detail, like the broad cheekbones and all that type of stuff. But really important for me just to use this machine and get all the detail possible that I can. For everyone who's ever trying to do a portrait and trying to get better at it, you got to realize you're always going to be learning how to do better. I mean, I got tattooed by Bob Tyrrell recently, and I learned a lot on portraits, you know. So you're always going to learn. It just comes to the point where it's kind of like, you know, you take the hottest chick you can imagine. If you really break her down, she's going to have a couple flaws here and there, but overall she's going to be really hot. That's what I like to consider my portraits to be. I'm always going to break them down, and I'm always going to want to do things better, you know, just like anything. But you want to overall make it really hot. You know what I mean? You want to make it super, super fun to look at. And you want to cover all your bases so that if anyone is to really look close at your portraits, the only things you need to fix and get better at are the things that will only make you 10 on a scale of 1 to 10 versus a 9, 9.5. Always understand there's room for growth. And I'll never know it all. This portrait right here is probably falls into the category of difficult. And what I mean by that, I'll break it down. It's difficult because it's time consuming. It's got so many different elements that, you know, it's just a time consuming piece. It's got hands, glass, skeleton, face, jacket, you know, fingers, buttons, so it's really detailed. It's really a tough portrait to do, but at the same time, it's just a great portrait to learn from. Really, really great portrait to learn from. But yeah, so overall, this is you know, a semi-difficult portrait. I mean, they're all hard. Price-wise, a portrait like this, you know, could run you, you know, $1,000, you know, easy, maybe $1,500, depending on how big you're doing it. That's why it's really important to really master these portraits, so you can get people knocking on your door wanting to pay you the money you deserve. The eyes are like the rims on a car. You have them, you nail the eyes, and you're going to nail a really good portrait. It's just one of those things where the eyes are so important. It gives it life. Portraits in general, like I said, they're very important tattoos, and you know they're meaningful tattoos, especially when you get a family member. You know, people that generally come to me for a portrait, they want you know, a family member, like a kid or a deceased loved one. That seems to be one of the most popular ones I've been tattooing in my portrait career, is just loved ones. And you know, I have a portrait of my son and my mother on me, so I can relate to that feeling and wanting a portrait. And there's nothing like having a portrait on you. It's almost not like a tattoo. It's almost like something else. It's almost a different fulfillment. Not to mention, you know, having a good portrait on you, You'll have an old lady stop you at a grocery store that never liked tattoos before, but you'll just kind of change her mind about the whole tattoo, just from having a portrait, because it's just so interesting to see a really nice portrait being done. It just looks nice. Every now and then I get lucky and I get to tattoo a celebrity or a musician, like Fieldy, who's turned out to be a pretty nice guy and friend and lives close to our shop. But he's allowed me to do some of my favorite portraits on him, some Bernini portraits and Jesus portrait and a Mother Mary portrait. Those portraits are always fun. It's always a challenge to make sure you leave those guys happy, because they're always getting asked to get tattooed by everybody. So it's always fun to put a portrait on someone like that, because then they really like it, and it's kind of fulfilling in a way. Every artist, I think, naturally is it's kind of like low self-esteem against their own artwork. Most of the artists I know, we always think we're not as good as we are. We always want to try harder, and that's good. That's a good attitude to have, because it'll keep you humble. You know what I mean? With my own work, I'm always trying to get better. I'm always criticizing my own work, and I think it's important to always have that attitude, because it'll keep you striving to be better, and striving to be better is what makes you the best. So, tattooing guys like Fieldy, it's almost like it's your time to shine. You have to leave them with a piece that they're going to pay attention to and like, and as I said before, as an artist, we tend to kind of look down on our own work, no matter how good it is. So, when you do a celebrity like that, or somebody like that who's had a lot, or anybody for that matter who has a lot of tattoos, you know that they know what's good and what's not good. So tattooing those guys, it's no joke. You definitely got to be on your A game. You definitely got to give them something that they're going to like. And your goal is to try to make them, love their new piece and be infatuated with the new piece, because, guys like that, tattoos aren't really impressing. They don't really impress them as much as a person who's just getting their first or second tattoo. They're covered heavily from toe to toe. So it's just always a challenge. Okay, switching back into the shader, I've kind of worked the tight areas enough to where I'm ready for the shader to start knocking out some of these bigger detailed areas, like the face, hair, and forehead and things like that. If you're doing a big portrait, you want to make sure the guy has a good pain threshold and pain tolerance, because when you're sitting for 4, 5, 6 hours, you don't want to get into a situation where they want to stop. My portrait from Bob Tyrrell took 7 hours, and it hurt like hell, but I couldn't stop. Had to get done. So you just want to make sure that they have a good pain tolerance, you know, especially if you know it's going to take more than 3-4 hours. On that note of just making sure they can sit, you know, portraits, you know, they're always better to get done in one session as far as the first pass, you know. There's some portrait artists that like to do a couple passes, you know, and if that's your style, that's cool too. But it's always good just to get at least a pass done the first time around, so that when it heals, everything's even, you know. The way I do my portraits is they're pretty much done. When he leaves here today, he'll have a finished portrait. But what we're going to actually cover also a little bit later on is the proper way to touch up a portrait. One of the most important parts of a portrait, something I've been leaving for last, is as a tattoo artist, you guys know that every tattoo, especially black and gray, tends to fade a little bit here and there. And if you're doing a lion or tribal or a sacred heart or an object type of tattoo, if something fades a little bit, usually nobody's going to be able to tell. But on a portrait, you can't really afford to have the eyes fade or the nose fade or the lips. Things like that, people will kind of know, you know what I mean? Especially a pupil. Sometimes people don't put black deep enough in the pupil, and it tends to fade. So when we're talking about touch-ups, which we'll jump into later on in the DVD, we have to actually realize it. A lot of tattoo artists won't touch up a portrait for whatever reasons, and I personally think that every portrait, it benefits the artist as well as the customer to do a brief touch-up. You know, maybe graze over the face a little bit more, darken up the nose. You know, there's been certain times, like I said, my tattoo that I got from Bob, for some reason, you know, that was one of the first tattoos I've ever seen heal perfectly, you know. And occasionally you'll get that. And like I tell all my customers, come back in 2 weeks, let me see how it heals. And I tell them most likely we'll do a touch-up session, which is another reason why the portraits are expensive, you know. You charge $750 to $1,000 a portrait. What they have to understand is a lot of times that entails touching it up once again, you know. I'll spend another hour on this portrait 3 weeks from now. But yeah, overall, I really think it's important to touch up portraits. I don't see any reason why an artist wouldn't touch up a portrait, unless they're like Bob and they can just nail it first time, you know. And that has a lot to do with, of course, technique. But then a lot of times, you know, sometimes people's skin just won't take the tattoo as well as others. So, like I say, it's always beneficial to tell your customer that your portraits are going to include a touch-up session, which also justifies the price once again. You know, you're charging a lot for a portrait. You let them know that you're going to have to touch it up again. It's almost like a second session. You know, a lot of times it's the customer's fault if they went swimming or whatnot, and if you have any proof of that, you make them pay a little bit more. But overall, your reputation's on the line. So why wouldn't you want somebody out there walking around with a perfect tattoo that you did to get you more customers? You got to look at the long run. If your tattoo's fading, which is a #1 problem with portrait artists, if your tattoo's out there and it's fading, and somebody happens to look at it, you'll never know what they're thinking in their head. You'll never know that they didn't want to come to you because it was faded, and they don't want a faded tattoo. On the other note is, if that same person sees your tattoo and you happen to touch it up and it looks perfect, now you have another customer. So you just want to always act like whoever's sporting your pieces is going to potentially get you more customers and build up your reputation around town in the tattoo industry. Guys like Bob Tyrell and Jack Rudy and Nico and Mike DeVries, all these portrait artists, they work hard to get the reputation that they have. You know, it takes 10 to 20 years to make an overnight success, as I heard put it best one time. So these guys are popping up on the scene with these portraits and stuff. A lot of hard work goes into making this happen. All it takes is a little bit more time and a little bit more patience to secure your reputation in the industry as being one of the best. You know, as I'm tattooing this portrait, I'm going to go ahead and set myself up for the white. You know, as I'm approaching the nose and as I'm approaching, you know, lots of these areas where I know I'm going to put white in, I'm setting myself up. You know, what I mean by that in more detail is Being that white's pretty much an opaque color if it's used properly, and we're going to talk about how to use white properly. Properly meaning you want it to last. You know, you want to set yourself up by having background, darker background where you know there's going to be whites, just so you could make it pop more. We're going to town on this face over here, trying to just not miss out on any detail.